The bankruptcy trustee called me on a Tuesday. She introduced herself as Patricia Nunes, said she was handling case number 24 to 30,187, and asked if I had a few minutes to discuss an asset that had been listed in my brother's Chapter 7 filing. I asked her which asset. She said a business called Meridian Wellness Group. The filing listed as wholly owned by the debtor, Tyler Brennan, with an estimated value of $1.4 million. I was quiet for a moment. Meridian Wellness Group was my company. I had founded it 9 years ago. I owned 100% of it. My brother Tyler had never held a single share. He had just told a federal bankruptcy court, under penalty of perjury, that he owned my business. Before I tell you what I said to Patricia, and what happened when Tyler found out, I'd already been on the phone with the trustee for 20 minutes before he even knew she'd called me. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Claire. I'm 36 years old. I'm the founder and sole owner of Meridian Wellness Group, a chain of physical therapy and rehabilitation clinics I built from a single rented suite into 11 locations across 3 states. To my brother, I am apparently an asset he can list. To the federal bankruptcy court, I was about to become a very inconvenient phone call. Tyler had always been the one who almost made it. He'd almost made partner at his first law firm before a personality conflict ended that. He'd almost closed a real estate deal that would have set him up for life before the market turned. He'd almost launched 3 different businesses, each one funded partly by our parents, each one collapsing within 18 months under circumstances that were never quite his fault. I had watched this pattern for over a decade with the specific exhaustion of a younger sibling who had stopped being surprised. I built Meridian differently. I started with $11,000 of savings and a business loan I personally guaranteed. I worked 60-hour weeks for the first 3 years. I hired my first employee before I paid myself a full salary. When clinic number 4 was struggling, I didn't call my parents. I refinanced my car and tightened the budget until it worked. Tyler had asked me for money 4 times over the years. I'd said yes twice, no twice. The 2 times I said no, he hadn't spoken to me for months. 8 months ago, he asked again, a bridge loan, he called it, for a consulting business that was almost profitable. I said no. I told him I loved him, but I wasn't going to keep funding a pattern. He told me I'd regret that. I didn't think much of it at the time. What I didn't know, what I only learned during the call with Patricia, was that Tyler's consulting business had collapsed under nearly $400,000 in debt, much of it personally guaranteed. 3 months ago, he'd filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. In a bankruptcy filing, you're required to disclose every asset you own, completely under oath. Hiding assets is fraud. But there's a specific and much rarer move, listing assets you don't own, inflating your apparent net worth on paper, sometimes to negotiate better terms with creditors before quietly correcting the record later, sometimes hoping no one checks closely enough to notice the lie. Tyler had listed Meridian Wellness Group, my company, with my name on every founding document, every lease, every state business registration, as his asset. I asked Patricia how this was even possible. She said the filing listed an ownership interest acquired through family business succession planning and referenced an attached document. She emailed it to me while we were still on the phone. It was a 1-page letter of intent dated 4 months ago. It described a plan for me to transfer 60% ownership of Meridian to Tyler in recognition of his ongoing strategic advisory role. It had a signature block with my name on it. I had never seen this document in my life. I had never signed it. I am not a forensic document examiner. But I didn't need to be one to know my own signature. The one on the letter was close enough that someone unfamiliar with it might not look twice. But the loop on the C was wrong. I'd been signing my name the same way since I was 14 years old. I called my attorney, a man named David who had handled every contract, lease, and employment dispute Meridian had faced for the past 6 years. I sent him the document. He was quiet for a long moment after reading it. He said, "This isn't going to hold up. But we need to handle this exactly right. Because right now, a federal court has a document with your forged signature on it claiming you gave away 60% of your company. You need that corrected on the record immediately, and we need to understand whether this is just incompetence or whether your brother believed this would actually work." I told David I wanted to know everything before I said a single word to Tyler. We spent the next several days building the file. David requested the full bankruptcy petition. He pulled Meridian's complete corporate history, articles of incorporation, every amendment, the operating agreement, 9 years of tax filings, every state registration in 3 states, all showing me as 100% owner with 0 changes ever. We had the question document examined. The expert's report took 4 days and concluded what I already knew. The signature showed characteristics consistent with tracing or close imitation rather than natural signing, and the document's metadata showed it had been created on a date that didn't match the date printed at the top. David also discovered something else. The notary stamp on the document belonged to a notary public whose license had been suspended 6 weeks before the document's stated date. I called Tyler myself. I didn't mention the trustee, the forged signature, or the suspended notary. I just told him I needed to talk to him about something and asked if he could meet me at my office on Thursday. He came in confident, almost relaxed, the way he always did when he believed he'd already won something. He sat down across from my desk and asked what was going on. I told him a bankruptcy trustee had called me about his filing. His expression flickered just slightly. He said it was just a formality, that his attorney had advised listing anticipated future interests to give a fuller financial picture to the court. I asked him what anticipated future interest he was referring to. He said the family had always talked about him eventually taking a bigger role in Meridian. That it was understood. That he'd assumed I'd be fine formalizing it given everything happening with his situation. I asked him if he'd ever discussed this with me directly. He said it had come up. I opened a folder on my desk. I placed the letter of intent in front of him. I asked him if he recognized it. He looked at it for a long moment, too long. He said something about how his attorney had drafted some documents to support the filing, that things had moved quickly, that he hadn't meant for it to feel like anything. I told him I had never seen this document before 3 days ago. I told him the signature on it wasn't mine. I told him a forensic examiner had already confirmed it. I told him the notary whose stamp was on the page had a suspended license 6 weeks before this document claims to have been signed. The room went very quiet. David, who had been sitting silently in the corner of my office, spoke for the first time. He introduced himself. He explained, calmly and without theatrics, that submitting a fraudulent document to a federal bankruptcy court was a serious matter. That beyond the civil exposure, knowingly filing false statements in a bankruptcy proceeding could constitute bankruptcy fraud under federal law, a crime that carries the possibility of significant fines and imprisonment. Tyler's face had gone pale. He said he hadn't known the document was fraudulent. He said his attorney had handled it. He said he'd just signed what he was told to sign. David asked if he'd like to explain that to Patricia Nunes directly, or if he'd prefer his attorney handle the correction. I want to be honest about what happened after that, because it wasn't the dramatic collapse you might expect. Tyler didn't go to prison. His attorney, who, it turned out, had not actually drafted the letter of intent, and who was reportedly furious to learn his name had been invoked, filed an emergency amendment to the bankruptcy petition within 48 hours, formally withdrawing the claim to Meridian and submitting a corrected disclosure. The trustee opened an inquiry into the forged document and the suspended notary, which I understand is still ongoing, separate from Tyler's case. Tyler called me a week later. He didn't apologize, not really. He said he'd gotten bad advice and that things had spiraled. He asked if we could move past it. I told him I needed time. I told him that listing my company as his asset wasn't a misunderstanding. It required him to either forge a document himself or knowingly use one he understood to be fake. Either way, it told me something about where he believed the line was and where he believed I'd let him stand. I haven't decided yet what our relationship looks like going forward. I don't think I owe anyone a quick answer on that. What I do know is that 9 years ago, I started Meridian with $11,000 and a willingness to work harder than anyone gave me credit for. I built something real, something with my name on every document that matters, something that exists because of decisions I made and risks I personally carried. It was never anyone's to list as an asset but mine.